Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us. Welcome. My name is Lea Little. Every day at noon Eastern Time, we do a book review right here. Today, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Word I'm Not Going to Say. This is by Mark Manson, and I'm really glad that you have joined me. I have to say, whether you're on Amazon or you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, it's really exciting to be here with you, and it's really a great privilege to do this. I've challenged myself to read a book a day and to summarize it and to share that. My accountability is to be here to share it. So I'm very glad that you're here to join me, and hopefully you can get some good motivation from this one. So by Mark Manson, really good stuff. I actually bought this for Colin, who's our Marine who is staying with us temporarily, and for Christmas, and I was like, hey, can I borrow that back and read it? I just kind of skimmed through it as I gave it to him for the holidays, and was really excited about what we found inside of it. So in this generation-defining self-help guide, a superstar blogger shows us that the key to being happier is to stop trying to be positive all the time and instead become better at handling adversity. I think that's a really good summary for the book. I think it gives you a really good idea, and because basically he kind of goes against a lot of the whole rah-rah self-motivation, all of it, I should say, self-motivation concept, and just says, hey, let's just, look things in the eye, see them, as they are. Because if you're always constantly trying to do better, his theory is, then you're reinforcing the message in your mind that you're not happy, that you're not already better. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle. So he's like, let's just break the cycle and live in reality, if you will. So he says, so just to give you a kind of quick little enticement from the front cover, for decades we've been told that positive thinking is the key to a happy, rich life, but those days are over. He says, F positivity. Mark Manson says, let's be honest, sometimes things are just screwed up. I'm going to paraphrase a lot in this book. And we have to live with it. So he talks about correcting, for the past few years, Manson, via his widely popular blog, has been working on correcting our delusional expectations for ourselves and the world. And now he brings his hard-fought wisdom to this groundbreaking book. He makes the argument, backed by both academics and well-timed poop jokes, that improving our life hinges not on our ability to turn lemons into lemonade, but on the premise that human beings are flawed and limited. Not everybody can be extraordinary, and some of it is not fair, and it's not your fault. So he advises us to get to know your limitations and accept them. And then he said that's the real source of your power. And I think that's really what was so empowering to me about this book is he says take responsibility for yourself. Things that happen, and from there, once you own the responsibility, you can choose what you want to give about and what you don't. So thereby cutting out things that are lesser important and maximizing your choices towards things that are more important based on your values. And once you do that, he says, automatically you're going to start having a happier life, and things are going to get better because you're living by your own values and you're making your choices based on those personal values. So brilliant. It's really straightforward, cut the crap, like right to it. And I love that. I like the language of it. I like that there's so much wisdom in page after page. I mean, I like to sort of go through as I'm reading and give myself little tabs here so I know what to refer to. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to highlight the whole book when it comes to this one. It's true. So many chapters. He talks about feedback loops in chapter 1. Chapter 2 is about how happiness is a problem, what I was just saying about how if you are searching for happiness, then the basic premise is that you don't already have it. It's always something out of reach. Chapter 3 is You Are Not Special. And that's a really interesting one because if we're all special, no one's special, right? He's like, get over the entitlement crap and sort of narcissism and just, face up to yourself and choose your values. The chapter 4 is about the value of suffering. Really, really interesting. I didn't think I was going to like that chapter very much because I was like, what is the point of that? But he talks about how personal growth can only really take place when we are suffering and then coming out on the other end. And so he says, choose what you want to suffer for. Like, what is worth suffering for? Like, is it a degree? Is it worth, suffering for that certain relationship? Is it worth, doing the hard work that you need to do to attain that job? Whatever the project might be, choose your project because you're going to suffer regardless. So you can either suffer ignorantly and kind of on your own, or you can choose to suffer in a way that takes you where you want to go. Really, really cool stuff, right? Chapter 5, you're always choosing, even if you're not choosing. Just the lack of choice is that in and of itself a choice. You're still having a choice happening there. And I want to say thank you so much if you're joining us on Amazon Live, just checking in over here with what's going on. And I love that you are. Oh, look at you. Kosh just typed in a little opening for me. Thank you, sister. Yeah. Kosh and Julia are here with me doing all the hard work behind the scenes. And I love that you are joining me as well. So thank you for being here. All right, we're talking about the subtle art of not giving a word I'm not going to say. A counterintuitive approach to living a good life by Mark Manson. Really a good book. You're wrong about everything, but so am I. That's chapter 6. Failure is the way forward. I really like that one as well, talking about the failure and success paradox and that pain and suffering in the earlier chapter, part of the process. The importance of saying no, again, choosing what you are going to be a part of or what's going to be important to you based entirely on your own value system. So really, really good stuff. And it's an easy read. It's there's a lot of depth, but it's not particularly difficult to make your way through as long as you don't mind a few curse words along the way. Well, a lot of curse words along the way. All right. All right. Let's dive in. I want to say hello to Facebook friends that are joining as well. So whether you're joining me on Amazon Live, I love, hi Ramona. So super glad to have you here. And it's refreshing. And if you are joining on YouTube, thank you for being here as well. All righty. Okay. And Tim Barrett, thank you for being here. Lovely. Adil, thank you for being here. Love it. Okay, let's dive in. If you have any questions, I'm glad to go there too. All right, so he talks about you get angry. Let's begin back here. Right over. Yeah. The beginning talks about don't try. So he gives a story of a late in life famous author who was sort of tragic, like she was kind of really lazy, and then sort of at the end of his life attained some success because somebody almost unlikely discovered him or helped him in getting his work published. So he talks about his story and what happened, that he never gave up, he never stopped trying, he always believed in himself, he persisted against the odds. But then on his tombstone it said, don't try. So his whole idea was like just not trying to run towards success. This is the real story, he says, of Bukowski's success. His comfort with himself as a failure. So the author sort of accepted that he was a failure, drank too much, did a lot of unscrupulous things. And even after his fame, he still showed up to poetry readings hammered and verbally abused people in his audience, et cetera, et cetera. fame and success did not make him a better person, nor was it by becoming a better person that he became famous and successful. He says self-improvement and success often occur together, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same thing. So I think that's really right at the beginning, kind of a really cool positioning. Our culture today is obsessively focused on unrealistic, positive expectations. Be happier, be healthier, be the best, better than the rest, be smart, be fast, be richer, be sexier, most popular, more productive, more envied, more admired, being perfect and amazing, and crap about 12-karat gold nuggets before breakfast each morning while kissing your selfie-ready spouse and 2.5 kids goodbye. Then fly your helicopter into your wonderfully fulfilling job where you'd spend days doing incredibly meaningful work that's likely to save the planet one day. He says, but when you really stop and think about it, conventional life advice, all the positive, happy, self-help stuff we hear all the time is actually fixating on what you lack. It lasers in on what you perceive as your personal shortcomings and failures to already be. So again, it's like the assumption that you're already working from a negative, right? So I love the premise there. It's a different way of thinking about things. I really like it. He said the key to life is not giving about more. It's giving, and sometimes it's hard to swap words in this book, about giving less, giving, paying attention only to what is true and immediate and important. True, immediate, and important. Fascinating, isn't it? So he says there's a feedback loop, an insidious quirk to your brain that if you let it in, it can drive you absolutely batty. Tell me if this sounds familiar to me. You get anxious about confronting somebody in your life, the anxiety cripples you, you start wondering why you're so anxious, now you become anxious about being anxious, doubly anxious, now you're anxious about your anxiety, which is causing more anxiety. Quick, where's the whiskey? Okay, let's say you have an anger problem. You get angry at the stupidest, most inane stuff, and you have no idea why. And the fact that you get so pissed off easily starts to make you even more angry. And then in your petty rage, you realize that being angry all the time makes you a shallow and mean person. And you hate this, and you hate it so much, you get angry at yourself. Now look at you. You're angry all the time, getting angry and angry about being angry. And again, so you get the loop, right? The cycle. Really interesting. He says back in Grandpa's day, he would feel like crap and think to himself, gee whiz, I sure do feel like a cow turd today. But hey, I guess that's just life. I'm going to go back to shovel hay. And that's it. He said it's that last part that gets us into trouble. We feel bad about feeling bad. We feel guilty for feeling guilty. We get angry about getting angry. We get anxious about feeling anxious. What is wrong with me? So this is why not giving a bleep is the answer and always will be. This is why it's going to save the world. Big promise. The subtle art of not giving a bleep is going to save the world. It's going to save it by accepting that the world is totally messed up and it's all right because it's always been that way and it will always be that way. Love it. Look it straight in the eye, call it for what it is, see it for what it is, and then deal with it and get on. Love it. He says, George Orwell said that what's in front of one's own nose requires a constant struggle. We joke about first world problems, but we really have become victims of our own success. Stress-related issues, anxiety disorders, cases of depression have skyrocketed in the past 30 years, despite the fact that everybody has a flat screen TV, you can have your groceries delivered. It's so true, right? I mean, I really love and admire the honesty of this book because there's this thing wrong with all of the how to be happy stuff that's shared 8 million times on Facebook in the past few years. Here's what nobody realizes about all of this crap. The desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience. I read that, I was like, wow, right? So fascinating. The desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience. And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. How cool is that, right? So this is a total twist. I'm paraphrasing and substituting words. I'll give you a minute to unpretzel your brain and maybe read that again. Wanting positive experience is a negative experience. Accepting negative experience is a positive experience. So it's what philosopher Alan Watts used to refer to as the backwards law. The idea that the more you pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become, as pursuing something only reinforces the lack that you don't have it in the first place. Great way to say it, right? Sometimes you hear these things, but until somebody says it that directly, or at least for me, when I read the words, I was like, so simple and so true. So he says, I can't read that part to you. If you like really sarcastic language that's very direct and very raw, then this is definitely the book for you. How can I summarize this? Okay, if I stop giving a rip about all of those important things, a beach body and the Camaro and all this stuff, I'll never achieve anything. I don't want that to happen, do I? So glad you asked, he says. Ever notice sometimes when you care less about something, you do it better? Notice how often it's the person who is the least invested in the success of something that actually ends up achieving it. Notice how sometimes when you stop giving everything seems to fall into place? What's with that? What's interesting about the backwards law is that it's called backwards for a reason. Not giving a rip works in reverse. If pursuing the positive is a negative, then pursuing the negative generates the positive. The pain you pursue in the gym results in better health all around, right? So that's where he starts talking about, again, it's all about your choices. Seriously, I could keep going and going and going, but you get the point. Everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. I love that. Isn't that so true? I just wanted to say hello, by the way, if you're joining me on Facebook Live. I see our audience growing here. Super glad to have you. So let's ponder this for a moment, right? Everything he's talking about here, everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. I took a moment as I was reading that and thought, okay, that is so true when I think about it, right? Whether you're working out and you're breaking down your muscles in the gym so that you can rebuild them. Whether, for me, my New Year's resolution was to read a book a day and have accountability by showing up here on Facebook and Amazon and YouTube by spending time talking about it and giving my take and a summary on it. There's some pain associated with that. There's, times I would rather spend a few extra minutes with my daughter in the evening time. Or last night we sat down and watched Trolls for the 100th time because, well, it's my favorite movie. And I kind of had this pinch of guilt, like, okay, you should be reading your book. You should be reading your book. I mean, that's kind of silly example. But I mean, when you think about going to med school, or you think about graduating from college, or you think about the tough things that you do in life, they really do require difficulty, right? But you're choosing that difficulty because you are wanting to attain that result. I thought that was so super powerful. So again, these are great ideas that are inside this book that position, instead of the normal kind of self-help way, to really cut right through it. It reminds me a little bit of the Jen Sincero book about being how to be. Yeah, I can't remember that.
How to be a bad.
Right. I can't say the title. Exactly. I can remember it. I can't say it. But same kind of concept, right? It's a little bit sarcastic, a little bit clearly really direct, but super honest. I love that super honesty. So thank you for being here with me and celebrating some of that honesty. Let's get back to it. All right. Okay, so that's the backwards law. He says, in my life, I have given about many things. I have also not given about many things. And like the road not taken, it was the things that I did not care about that have made all the difference. He says, chances are you know somebody in your life that has done that. They don't care about certain things and they accomplish amazing feats. The moments of, I can't say it. The moments of some of these things are moments that define our lives. The major switch in careers. Oh my gosh, have you ever done that? Have you ever walked into somebody's office and submitted a letter of resignation? Oh my God, I thought I was going to die the first time I did that. My hands were sweaty. It was like crazy. But it was that line of pain going through because I knew I was moving on to an opportunity that I wanted to embrace, that I wasn't even actually really qualified for at the time. But I learned it and I got to be the best at it, or at least the best in the book I was trying to achieve. And that, again, going through that pain, the moments are the moments that define our life. The major switch in careers, the spontaneous choice to drop out of college and join a rock band, the decision to finally drop that dumb deadbeat boyfriend whom you caught wearing your pantyhose too many times. His examples are just hilarious. So he says, look, this is how it works. You're going to die one day. I know that's kind of obvious, but I wanted to remind you just in case you've forgotten. You and everyone you know are going to be dead soon. And the short amount of time you have between here and there, you have a limited amount of these that you can give. So choose wisely. Very few, in fact. If you go round and round giving a rip about everything and everyone without conscious thought or choice, well, then you're going to get... Not saying it. It is a good quote. I love it, right? I know. I can't highlight it. It's Colin's book. I know it's not my. Usually I like highlight my books and write in them, but this one was a gift to him, so that would just not be nice. So that aside, yeah, but we can remember that one. There is a subtle art, thus the title, to not giving. And though the concept might sound ridiculous, and I may sound like I can't say that word. What I'm talking about here is essentially learning how to focus and prioritize your thoughts and your personal values. You want to pick and choose what matters to you and what does not matter to you based on finely honed personal values. I love that. Think about that Stephen Covey book that we read earlier in the year about what is your personal mission? What is your family mission? I love how this kind of overlaps and feeds back into each other. So he says you have to take time then to contemplate what are your personal values? What is that personal mission? This is incredibly difficult. It takes a lifetime of practice and discipline to achieve, and you will regularly fail. But it's perhaps the most worthy struggle one can undertake in one's life. It is perhaps the only struggle in one's life. That is good stuff. If you're liking what we're talking about here, I just have to encourage you. If you are on Amazon Live, this is in your carousel, highlighted for you, ready to go. Love to send it your way. All you have to do, purchase it, put it in your cart. If you are someone who is watching on Facebook, we'll put the link in for you, and YouTube as well. This is a great book. There's lots of incidental scenarios that and illustrations that he puts in here. Obviously I can't share the whole book with you, but I have to tell you, it's such a good read. Just a disclaimer though, there's lots of language. So if you're okay with that, it's well worth the philosophy, the meaning, the message that is in here. All right. Okay, we talked about going to die this way at some point. This is incredibly difficult. It takes a lifetime of practice and discipline. All right. So then he goes on to sort of enumerate some things for us. Subtlety number one, not giving up does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. So again, here, indifferent people are afraid of the world and repercussions of their own choices. That's why they don't make meaningful choices. They hide in a gray, emotionless pit of their own making, self-absorbed and self-pitying, perpetually distracting themselves from this unfortunate thing demanding their time and energy called life. He's a great writer. I love that. Because here's the sneaky truth about life. There's no such thing as not giving a, you must give a about something. It's part of our biology to always care about something and therefore to always care. The question then is, what do we care about? What are we choosing to give a care about? How can we not give some care about something that doesn't matter? Like, clean up your mindset, right? I love this. Okay, subtlety number 2. To not give a rip about adversity, you must first give a rip, I'm substituting here obviously, about something more important than adversity. And what is that? Something you have to ponder and contemplate and choose, right? Whether you realize it or not, you're always choosing what you care about. He talks about when you're a kid, you're crying about everything, right? And then when you're young, everything's new and exciting and everything seems to matter so much. My daughter's going through this at 11. Oh my goodness, everything matters so much. So true. As we get older, with the benefit of experience and having seen so much time slip by, we begin to notice that most of these short things in life have most of these little things have little lasting input or impact in our lives. Those people whose opinions we cared about they're no longer present in our lives. Rejections that were so painful in the moment have actually worked out for the best. We realize how little attention people pay to the superficial details about us, and we choose not to obsess much over them. It's so true, isn't it? Oh my gosh. What is the saying? Like, as you're younger, you just think everybody's thinking about you, and then as you get older, you realize nobody's thinking about you. This book will not teach you how to gain or achieve, but rather how to lose and let go. It will teach you to take inventory of your life and scrub out all but the most important items. Love that. Get rid of it. It's almost like that Jack Welch concept, right? In business, like get rid of the bottom 10%. It will teach you how to close your eyes and trust that you can fall backwards and still be okay. It will teach you to give fewer. It will teach you to not try. This is a really hard book to paraphrase. Happiness is a problem. Okay, chapter 2. Okay, he goes on. We could talk about this book for hours. What do you think? It's really good stuff, isn't it? Oh, I just love it. Okay, he goes on in chapter 2 to talk about a king, a Himalayan 2,500 years ago, in the Himalayan foothills of present-day Nepal, there lived a great palace and a king who was going to have a son. His son, the king, had a particularly grand idea. He would make the child's life perfect. The child would never know a moment of suffering. Every need, every desire would be accounted for at all times. The king built high walls around the palace that prevented the prince from ever going outside. He, the spoiled child, lavishing him with food and gifts, surrounding him with servants who catered to his every whim, just planned it all out. So the story goes on to say that the prince wandered outside the gates, unbeknownst to his father, and saw that there was suffering for the first time and was like, what's happening? Because he had never known this. He had a servant drive him through the local village, and what he saw horrified him. For the first time in his life, the prince saw human suffering. He saw sick people, old people, homeless people, people in pain, people dying. The prince returned to the palace and found himself in sort of an existential crisis. And then he vows to himself to leave the beauty of the palace and all of its surplus behind and go live as a homeless person. So he goes and does this for, I think, 30 years. He had grand ideas. He wouldn't just run away, just give up his royalty and his family and all his possessions. He would starve himself, torture himself, beg for scraps for food. and the next night he snuck out, never to return. He confronted, he suffered through disease and pain and loneliness and decay. He confronted the brink of death itself, often limited to eating a single nut each day. As a few years went by, then a few more, and then nothing happened. The prince began to notice that his life of suffering wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. It wasn't bringing him the insight that he had desired. It wasn't revealing anything deeper inside of him, any deeper mystery of the world or its ultimate purpose. In fact, the prince came to know what the rest of us have always known, that suffering totally sucks. And it's not necessarily that meaningful either. He says, as with being rich, there's no value when it's done without purpose. Soon the prince came to the conclusion that his grand idea, like his father's, was in fact a terrible idea, and he should probably go back and do something else instead. Totally confused, the prince cleaned himself up and went and found a big tree to sit by. He decided to sit under that tree and not get up until he had another grand idea. As legend goes, the confused prince sat under the tree for 49 days. We won't delve into the biological viability of sitting in the same spot for 49 days. His writing is just great. But let's just say that in that time, the prince came to a number of profound realizations. One of those realizations is this: life itself is a form of suffering. The rich suffer because of the riches, the poor suffer because of their poverty, people with a family suffer because people without a family suffer because they have no family, people with a family suffer because they have a family, people who pursue worldly pleasures suffer because of their worldly pleasures, blah, blah, blah. So, this isn't to say that all suffering is equal. Some suffering is more painful than other suffering, but we all suffer nonetheless. Years later, the prince would build his own philosophy and share it with his world, and this would be its first and central tenet, that pain and loss are inevitable, and we should let go of resisting them. The prince would later come to be known as Buddha. And in case you haven't heard of him, he was kind of a big deal. I love that. I'd never heard of that story. Who would have known, picking up this book, that you'd hear the origin story of Buddha? I love those happy surprises. I mean, would you think? Right? I mean, I just wouldn't assume that. Yeah. That's the fun of this adventure.
These people are so lighthearted.
Yeah.
Because they don't take them.
Because they don't take them so seriously, right? Yeah, I mean, and actually, I mean, that's the reason why I bought this book for Colin, right? Because, I mean, as a stepmom, I can't be like, here's a self-help book. That would just be rude, right? That would just be like not appropriate. But I thought, and as I glanced through, I mean, obviously I didn't read it cover to cover before I gave it to him, but I glanced through it and I was like, oh, this is just the perfect message for somebody that wouldn't normally read the same things that I read, even though the message is still there. So isn't it cool? I mean, it's just cool.
They do. Because,
but they do.
How did you come across that book again? Because I said, hey, this was on the top list.
Right,
you should read it. You're like,
right.
Wait a minute.
I got that. Right, yeah, and yeah, because people, obviously, it's a top seller, because Kasha was pointing it out to me. She was like, oh.
I've wanted to read it for years, so I figured I'll give it to Leah.
Right.
Exactly.
Sucker. That would make me the sucker, right? Yeah, that would make you the smart one, actually. Way better. Way better. I love it. I see a sidekick thing coming on here. So again, that's why you're here, right? It's a short summary, right? I'm glad to be the sucker of doing the summaries of books that you may not fully read, because that's what I'm committed to for my own personal growth. And it's great to be having accountability to be here to do it, right? You know, I'm choosing, in fact, I reminisced on this a little bit, because this is actually what I'm doing with this book. And with all the books that I'm reading, I'm choosing my own suffering, because one of the biggest premises of this entire book is make better choices so that you're going to suffer. That's why the story about the Buddha is in here. So he chose to suffer for 30 years and be like, disease ridden and starving himself and torturing himself and all of this. And he realized he still could have suffered at the palace with all of his, wealth and riches. He's still going to suffer one way or the other. So the premise of the book that Mark Mason makes is to then choose what kind of suffering you want to have. I'm choosing to suffer. I don't know that it's necessarily, again, he says all suffering is not the same, but by choosing to read a book every day and be here at noon Eastern time and share with you a summary of that book, that's my accountability, and hopefully it can, help and encourage you, and, like, gosh, I'll do the work for you. But it's the whole idea that I'm choosing that, because what I decided is that there was too much fluff going on in my life and things I was falling into caring about that I just didn't need to spend my time doing. And I needed to prioritize my relationship with Darren, my relationship with Victoria, and my positive mindset, which leads me to better things. And so I thought, what better way to do that? Instead of making a classic New Year's resolution, go to the gym, which I know I'm going to break because I, always have. I was like, okay, I'm going to read a book a day and challenge myself in a new way. So again, it was about, I'm living the illustration of what he's talking here about, like making a better choice, so that that's what I'm focused on. And so my suffering of having to, drink one less glass of red wine at night and finish a book, or kind of prioritize my evening time with the family so that I can make time to do this, or my morning time to catch up. Like today I didn't hit the gym because I needed to finish my book. Making that choice, it is a little bit of a form of suffering. So I digress, but I love that I'm living it, and I love that I'm able to give you a shortcut. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, this premise is the problem. There is a premise that underlies a lot of assumptions and belief. The premise is that happiness is algorithmic, that it can be worked for and earned and achieved, as if you're getting accepted into law school or building something really complicated in a Lego set. He said this premise is the problem. Happiness is not a solvable equation. Dissatisfaction and unease are inherent parts of human nature, and as we'll see, necessary components to creating happiness. So again, chasing after it then brings the mindset that you don't already have it. So he's like, hello, just cut to it. Okay, so, all right, let's move forward, because otherwise we'll be talking about this for the next 5 hours. Okay, but I digress. Oh, and I'm actually reading that. This pain, as much as we hate it, is useful. Pain is what teaches us to pay attention to when we're young or careless. It helps show us what's good versus what's bad for us. It helps us understand and adhere to our own limitations. It teaches us not to around near hot stoves or stick metal objects into electrical sockets. Therefore, it's not always beneficial to avoid pain and seek pleasure, since pain can at times be life or death important to our well-being. But pain is not merely physical. As anyone who has had to sit through the first Star Wars prequel can tell you, we humans are capable of experiencing acute psychological pain as well. Okay, so don't hope for a life without problems. He says there's no such thing. Hope for a life full of good problems. That's a great quote. Hope for a life filled with good problems. True. Happiness comes from solving problems. Problems are a constant in life. When you solve your health problem by buying a gym membership, you create new problems, like you have to get up early and get to the gym on time, sweating like a meth head for 30 minutes on an elliptical, and then getting showered and changed for work so you don't stink up the whole office. When you solve your problem of not spending enough time with your partner by designating Wednesday night as date night, you generate new problems, such as figuring out what to do every Wednesday night. And you get the idea. Problems never stop. They merely change or get upgraded. Happiness comes from solving problems. The key word here is solving. If you're avoiding problems, or you feel like you don't have any problems, then you know what he's going to do. He's going to call you on that. Then you're going to make yourself miserable. If you feel like you have problems that you can't solve, you will likewise make yourself miserable. The secret sauce is in the solving of the problems, not in having the problems. To be happy, we need something to solve. Happiness is therefore a form of action. It's an activity, not something that is passively bestowed on you, not something that magically you discover in a top 10 article on the Huffington Post or from any specific guru or teacher. It doesn't magically appear when you finally make enough money to add that extra room onto your house. You don't even find it waiting for you in a place, an idea, a job, a book for that matter. Happiness is a constant work in progress, because problem solving is a constant work in progress. The solutions to today's problems will lay in the foundation for tomorrow's problems, and so on. Oh, it's such good stuff. True happiness only occurs when you find the problems you enjoy having and enjoy solving. That's so cool. Okay, whatever your problems are, the concepts are the same. Solve problems, be happy. Solve problems, be happy. Unfortunately, for most people, it doesn't seem that simple. Solve problems, be happy. It's because they things up in at least one of two ways. Denial, victim mentality. People deny and blame their problems for somebody else. There's a way to temporarily escape your problems. You can escape by a quick rush that makes you feel better. Highs come in many forms, whether it's a substance or moral righteousness from blaming other people, the thrill of some new risky adventure. Much of the self-help world is predicated on peddling highs to people rather than solving legitimate problems. How's that for a direct statement? Remember, nobody who's actually happy has to stand in front of a mirror and tell himself he's happy. Emotions are overrated. There you go. Look, I don't mean to make light of your midlife crisis or the fact that your drunk dad stole your bike when you were 8 years old and you still haven't gotten over it. But when it comes right down to it, if you feel crappy, it's because your brain is telling you that there's a problem that's unaddressed or unresolved. In other words, negative emotions are a call to action. Another huge premise of the book, don't you think? Again, I want to say thank you for joining us on Amazon Live, Facebook Live, YouTube. I think that this is such an important point that it's worth kind of parsing out a little bit, right? His point here, as he's talking about negative emotions, are there to tell you something, not to ignore them, not to tuck them away. It's just so important. I so resonate with that because I tucked them away for so long, just kind of in the world of like, I'm just going to be positive. And then I found that I wasn't being real. I wasn't being legitimate. And that just led to counseling, right? And thank goodness it did, because now I'm actually, pretty happily solving problems and being happy. So I love this. So he's not negating negative actions. He's talking about them as a call to action. Many people are taught to repress their emotions for various personal, social, cultural reasons, particularly negative emotions. Sadly, to deny one's emotions is to deny the feedback mechanism that is there to help a person solve problems. That is so empowering. Negative emotions are there as a call to action. Something's happening. It's an alert. So, an obsession over an over-investment in emotions fails us for the simple reasons that emotions never last. Whatever makes us happy today is no longer going to make us happy tomorrow, and so on, because our biology always needs something more. This is what psychologists sometimes refer to as a concept of hedonic treadmill, the idea that we're always working hard to change our life situation, but we never actually feel any different. This is why our problems are recursive and unavoidable. The person you marry is going to be the person you fight with. The house you buy is the house you repair. The dream job is going to be the job you stress over. This is a difficult pill to swallow, he says. We like the idea that there's some form of ultimate happiness that can be attained. We like the idea that we can alleviate all of our suffering permanently. We like the idea that we can feel fulfilled and satisfied with our lives forever, but we cannot. So he says, choose your struggle. If I ask you what you want out of life, everybody says the pat answer, right? The traditional, I just want to be happy. He's like, everybody enjoys what feels good. Everybody wants to have a happy, carefree life. Everybody wants that. It's easy to want that. A more interesting question, here we go to the heart of it. A more interesting question is, what pain do you want in your life? And when I read that, I was like, what the heck is he talking about? What pain do you want? But it comes down to, again, the basic premise of there's going to be suffering in life. What choices can you make so that you have the suffering of, whatever, going to the gym, reading great books, choosing that suffering because that's what you're going to focus on, and thereby choosing your pain, right? And then getting to, again, making choices, being happy, doing something, creating that action, again, and then happiness. Because happiness requires struggle. It grows from problems. Joy doesn't sprout out of the ground. Joy doesn't just sprout out of the ground like daisies and rainbows. Real, serious, lifelong fulfillment and meaning have to be earned through choosing the managing of our struggles. Whether you suffer from anxiety or loneliness or obsessive compulsive disorder or can't say that, who ruins half of your waking hours of the day, the solution lies in acceptance and active engagement of the negative experience. Active engagement of the negative experience, not the avoidance of it, not the salvation from it. So cool. He talks about working out, people that want to start their own business. What determines your success is, what do you want to enjoy? The relevant question is, what pain do you want to sustain? The path to happiness is full of things that you step in and shame. You have to choose something. So, and then he goes on to talk about you're not special, because then if everybody's special, nobody's special. He says in the 1960s, there was an idea of developing high self-esteem. Having positive thoughts and feelings about oneself became all the rage in psychology. Research found that people who thought highly about themselves generally performed better, and I think that's generally true over the years, but it's a generation later and the data is in. We're not all exceptional. It turns out that merely feeling good about yourself doesn't really mean anything unless you have a good reason to feel good about yourself. Turns out that adversity and failure are actually useful and even necessary for developing strong-minded, successful successful adults. Reminds me of Victoria when she walked in from school yesterday. Gosh, I picked her up and I asked her how school was. And she said, well, I got a participation award for soccer. And she said, but I don't really care. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. And I was like, yes. Yeah, she said, I don't want that.
That's the exact same thing she told me. She got that. And I was like, at least you understand that.
I know. I was like, yes, she gets it. I don't have to explain that to her. She's already got it. Because, yeah, I mean, we all get a participation award if we're breathing and we're here. Like, here's our award. So, okay. So, let's scoot along here. A person who actually has high self-worth is able to look at the negative parts. This is really important. A person who has high self-worth is able to look at the negative parts of his character frankly. Yes, sometimes I'm irresponsible with money. Yes, sometimes I exaggerate my own success. Yes, I rely too much on others to support me because I should be more self-reliant, and then acts to improve them. So he says that a higher self-worth is being able to say, yeah, okay, sometimes I am full of, maybe I need to do something about it, right? I really like that. Eventually, reality must hit. The underlying problems will once again make themselves clear. It's just a question of when and how painful it will be. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, for sake of time, because we can't do this all day, especially because I do it every day, we're going to scoot along here. And again, just want to thank you for joining me. Every day at noon, we're doing a book review. This one is The Subtle Art of Not Giving A by Mark Manson, and it is the anti-self-help book that just is helpful in so many ways. If you are here on Amazon Live, it's in your carousel. You can certainly place it into your cart and purchase it. We'll put links for you in our Facebook as well as on YouTube. So, all right, let's summarize here. But if I'm not going to be special or extraordinary, what is the point? The rare people who do become truly exceptional at something do so not because they believe they're exceptional. On the contrary, they become amazing because they're obsessed with improvement, and that obsession with improvement stems from an unerring belief that they are, in fact, not all that great. It's the anti-entitlement. It's the atomic habits, right? Like we read in the first week of January. It's that small 2% improvement that is every day. It's that next small micro step. I'm elaborating there. Then he goes on about the value of suffering. I think we've covered that. The self-awareness onion, sort of pulling back those layers. We all have emotional blind spots. Often they have to do with the emotions that were taught to be inappropriate growing up. He goes on to talk a bit about that. Values underline everything we are and everything we do. So he says most people are horrible at answering the why questions accurately. So for many people, this passes as let me just back up. People may perceive how they feel, but when they ask themselves why they feel a certain way, they tend to come up with a way to blame other people. He says the answer is to have your own, take your own problems on. But to not be the victim. He says most self-help gurus ignore this deep level of self-awareness. He says you want to be self-aware, so you have to ask yourself the tough introspective questions. Honest self-questioning is difficult. It requires asking yourself simple questions that are uncomfortable to answer. In fact, in my experience, the more uncomfortable the answer, the more likely it is to be true. And then he gives us some tools and prompts and questions. That's why I think you got to have the book. I can't tell you everything. There's so much good stuff in here. All right. He talks again about terrible values, pleasure, material success, always being right. That's one I had to conquer. Let's not talk about that. But are there any of these striking a chord with you? Always being right. Our brains are inefficient machines. He goes on to cite examples about how much we can actually make up in our brains to justify what we think or what we may have seen or the stories that we weave together. Just to always, the fact is, people who base their self-worth on being right about everything prevent themselves from learning from their mistakes. The lack of ability to take on new perspective and empathize with others, they close themselves off to new and important information. So true. All right. Well, there's something to be said for staying on the sunny side of life. The truth is sometimes life sucks, and the healthiest thing you can do is admit it. Denying negative emotions leads to experiencing deeper and prolonged negative emotions and emotional dysfunction. That's so true. Listen to those prompts. And then he goes on to talk about defining good and bad values. So the rest of the book then becomes a gateway, tools of, okay, so now that hopefully you agree on the premise, what are you going to do with it next? Where are you going to go with it? And he said there's again, a simple realization from which all personal improvement and growth emerges. This is the realization that we individually are responsible for everything in our lives, no matter the external circumstances. Pow. We are responsible. We don't always control what happens to us, but we always control how we interpret what happens to us and how well we respond. I think I could go on and on and on, but I don't know if there's a better place to end up. That it's all about personal responsibility, asking yourself the right questions so that you can then choose your pain more wisely, so that you can, again, have action and happiness and action and happiness. And then, the rest of the book is again about the work, the practice, as Seth Godin would call it in his great book, The Failure and Success Paradox. I'll leave you with one last little tidbit in the book. When Pablo Picasso was an old man, he was sitting at a cafe in Spain doodling on his used napkin. He was nonchalant about it, the whole thing, drawing whatever amused him in that moment. Kind of the same way teenage boys, can't say that, except this was Picasso. So his bathroom stall, okay, so let's just, let me just summarize the story. Anyway, some woman sitting near him was looking on in awe. After a few moments, Picasso finished his coffee, crumpled up the napkin, and threw it away. The woman stopped him and said, "Can I have that napkin you were drawing on?" I'll pay you for it. Sure, Picasso replied, $20,000. The woman's head jolted back as if she just flung a brick at her. What? It took you 2 minutes to draw that. No, ma'am, Picasso said. It took me over 60 years to draw this. He stuffed the napkin in his pocket and walked out of the cafe. Right? Improvement at anything is based on thousands of tiny failures, and the magnitude of your success is based on how many times you've failed at something. I just think that's a great story. Yeah. It took him 60 years to do 2 minutes worth of work, all of that. So, okay, we're going to wrap up here. I hope you like it. I hope if you're purchasing it, remember there's language clearly throughout the book. It's such an important book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving A by Mark Manson. It's available for you in your carousel here on Amazon Live. We'll put the links for you on Facebook as well as on YouTube. So enjoy the rest of the day today, and remember to choose what you want to care about. Choose wisely, and then leave the rest behind. All right, we'll see you tomorrow, noon Eastern, for another great book review. Bye now.